Hey everyone, welcome to This Explainer. And a massive shout out to all the grade 11 economics students hanging out with us today. So, if you've ever lost track of time playing a city building game, like SimCity or City Skylines, you absolutely know the golden rule of starting a brand new map. You don't just sit there staring at an empty patch of grass, crossing your fingers, waiting for massive skyscrapers and high-tech industries to just magically spawn out of nowhere. I mean, it just doesn't work like that. First, you have to drop a huge chunk of your starting in-game currency on the boring stuff. We're talking power grids, water pipes, a sprawling network of roads. You literally have to build the foundation before the simulation can even think about taking off. Well, it turns out real-world economics operates on that exact same logic. Today, we're diving into the ultimate macroeconomic strategy guide, how real-world governments actually kickstart national growth. Think about it for a second. Why on earth would you lay down roads before the factories even exist? Well, just like a top-tier gamer, a government cannot afford to just cross its fingers and wait around for random economic growth. It has to actively spend its currency to build the foundation first. A private company isn't going to build a massive state-of-the-art factory if there are no highways to transport their goods, no power grids to run their machines, and no educated workforce to hire, right? The government has to take that first step. It has to act as the primary catalyst. By making these massive early game investments, the state creates an environment where private businesses actually want to spawn and grow. To ground our gaming analogy in some actual economic theory, we need to define exactly what this in-game currency spending is called out here in the real world. According to our source material, it's known as public expenditure. Basically, this refers to the expenses incurred by public authorities. So that means the central government, state governments, down to local bodies, all to meet collective needs and promote the economic and social welfare of the citizens. And we aren't just talking about paying for the police or maintaining law and order, though, obviously that's super important. We are specifically looking at how this public expenditure is actively used as a tool to unlock real economic development. Okay, let's dive right into this. If a country, particularly an underdeveloped one, wants to level up its economy, the government generally follows a very specific core gameplay loop. Based on the economic principles we're looking at, public expenditure drives growth through four distinct strategies, or what we'll call the four pillars. These pillars are the exact mechanisms governments use to take a developing map and turn it into a thriving, high-level economy. We're going to walk through each one of these to see exactly how the government spends its revenue to force the economic simulation forward. Starting us off, we've got Pillar 1, direct infrastructure overheads, which is essentially the base grid. In gaming terms, this is laying down the absolute basics for your country to function. You absolutely cannot have a late-game economy running on early-game infrastructure. The state directly kickstarts this growth by developing social overheads and establishing key infrastructure. We're talking massive public works projects here, huge dams for irrigation and power, massive national highway networks, and railway systems. But it goes a step further. The text highlights that governments also use public expenditure to establish basic and key industries, specifically heavy capital goods industries. Think of things like massive steel plants or heavy machinery manufacturing. These are massive, super expensive undertakings that private investors usually avoid early on, simply because they take way too long to turn a profit. So the government steps in, spends the money, and spawns these heavy industries, because they act as the base materials for literally everything else built in the economy. Moving right along, let's look at Pillar 2, the indirect skill booster, or leveling up your NPCs. So if Pillar 1 was about upgrading the map itself, Pillar 2 is all about upgrading the population. In a game, you need highly skilled NPCs to run your advanced tech buildings, right? Well, in the real world, a nation's economy can only grow as far as the skills of its citizens will take it. Governments pull this off by pouring public expenditure into funding widespread public education, establishing vocational training centers, and building high-tech research facilities. And this isn't just about handing out fancy diplomas. It's a highly calculated economic investment. By providing free or subsidized education and training, the government takes a population with basic skills and completely transforms them into highly capable, specialized workers. They are effectively upgrading the skill tree of the entire workforce. And the results? Funding the population's skills indirectly but massively promotes long-term economic development. As our source text points out, this public expenditure in education and research directly increases the efficiency and skill of the people. Better skills naturally mean higher productivity. A more productive workforce earns higher wages, they invent new technologies, and they produce way better goods. It's an indirect stimulus. The government isn't building the factory this time, but they are providing the genius engineers and the skilled technicians required to make that factory world-class. Which brings us to Pillar 3, targeted growth subsidies. If you are familiar with RPGs at all, you know all about buffs, those sweet temporary boosts to help you overcome a tough challenge. Well, governments deploy targeted financial buffs to specific sectors that just need a little extra help to become globally competitive. Take a look at agriculture. To ensure a nation can actually feed itself and generate raw materials, the government might use public expenditure to provide subsidized fertilizers or super cheap electricity to farmers. This directly buffs their production capabilities. Now, for industry, the government might offer direct financial assistance or tax breaks to private companies to encourage them to set up factories, especially in the backward or underdeveloped regions of the map. This significantly lowers the risk for private businesses and stimulates rapid industrial growth exactly where the government wants it. And finally, the endgame condition. Pillar 4, growth with social justice.
Listen, a massive GDP means absolutely nothing if the whole system just collapses from internal instability. In a city builder, if you ignore residential happiness, crime, and health, your citizens leave, and game over. You have to balance that happiness meter. If all the wealth generated by your shiny new infrastructure and industries goes to a tiny, tiny fraction of the population, you end up with severe inequalities in wealth and income. That is a fundamentally unstable economy. So a primary goal of public expenditure is to actively reduce these inequalities through welfare measures, social security, free medical facilities, and targeted investments in those poorer regions. The government redistributes resources to ensure the whole map thrives equitably. The ultimate goal is to achieve true social justice, meaning as the economy grows, the standard of living for everyone, especially the poorest, rises right alongside it.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how our source material perfectly captures that ultimate victory condition. It reminds us that public expenditure isn't some passive background activity. It plays a highly active role. Whether it is laying down the physical steel for a brand new railway, educating the next generation of software engineers, subsidizing local farmers, or ensuring the poorest citizens have basic access to healthcare, government spending is quite literally the engine that drives a developing nation forward. So as we wrap up this explainer, I want you to literally look out your own window today. Take a good look at your own real-world map. You can probably see Pillar 1 in the roads you drive on and Pillar 2 in the school you attend. But look a little closer. Does your nation's strategy actually balance that rapid infrastructure growth with true social equality? Is the government hitting that ultimate victory screen of growth with social justice? Keep that question in the back of your mind as you continue to study economics, because understanding exactly how that in-game currency is spent is the key to understanding the world around you. Thanks for hanging out with me for this explainer, and keep leveling up.